In relationships, especially those marked by emotional intensity and unresolved tension, silence is often misunderstood. When a woman stops calling, stops texting, or stops checking in, many men assume the door is closed. They interpret her absence as her final word that she's moved on, lost interest, or found someone else. But what if that silence isn't a declaration of indifference, but an invitation to show up differently? Men are taught to read action as affirmation. If she's not actively expressing care, it must mean she doesn't care at all. But relationships don't always move in linear expressions of interest. Sometimes a woman's silence isn't the end of the conversation. It's the space between chapters. It's the pause in which she waits, not passively, but watchfully, to see if you will notice that something has shifted. She's wondering, will he sense the absence of me, the same way I've always felt the absence of him? She's not testing you in a manipulative way. This isn't a game. It's a deep emotional boundary she's setting, a boundary formed from being the emotional initiator for too long. She has sent the late-night texts. She has tried to resolve arguments. She has held the emotional weight of the relationship. But now she is quiet, not because she's cold, but because she's tired. Not because she's over you, but because she's trying to see if you are capable of being the one who steps forward when she stops reaching back. And here's the crucial misunderstanding. Men often confuse a woman's emotional withdrawal with emotional closure. But silence is rarely final. In fact, silence can be one of the most emotionally charged forms of communication. It says, I'm still here, but I'm no longer willing to be here in the same way. Her silence carries expectation. It is not empty. It is full of questions. Are you aware? Are you willing? Do you care enough to notice? Men often feel paralyzed in the face of that silence. Cultural conditioning tells them not to chase, not to be vulnerable, not to show need. But presence is not the same as pursuit. Reaching out isn't about begging for love. It's about acknowledging connection even when it's strained. It's about showing her that you don't only value her when she's actively giving, that you recognize her absence because you were paying attention when she was present. There's also something deeper happening psychologically. Women tend to hold relational space. They are taught from a young age to maintain emotional connection, to preserve intimacy, to nurture. But when they finally stop doing that, it's not because they stopped caring. It's because they want to see if you were participating or just benefiting from what they held together. Her silence asks, can you be the one who reaches out now? Can you be the one who holds space for a change? This is especially difficult for men who are emotionally avoidant or who have been hurt before. The silence triggers anxiety. It stirs shame. It whispers, you're not wanted. When in reality, what it may be saying is, this is your moment to step in with your full presence, not because she's begging, but because you choose to. Women rarely spell this out. They don't send a memo that says, hey, I'm going to stop texting for a while, and I hope you use this as a chance to reflect and reconnect. Instead, they grow quiet. They make space, not to create distance, but to see if closeness matters to you when she's no longer the one creating it. It's a form of emotional protest, but it's also a profound invitation. Presence in this context isn't loud. It's subtle. It doesn't require grand gestures or dramatic speeches. It asks for attentiveness, for sensitivity, for emotional courage. It asks you to notice not just what is said, but what is no longer being said, to respond not just to her words, but to her emotional reality, to realize that sometimes the most important thing you can do is not wait for the right time or the perfect words, but to simply let her know you still care, that you still feel her absence, and that her silence has not gone unnoticed. In many relationships, especially those where one partner has become the emotional caretaker, silence becomes the final strategy for rebalancing emotional labor. It's not rejection, it's reorientation. It's not that she doesn't want to be close, it's that she wants to be met fully, not just when she initiates, but also when she withdraws. She's asking you to move not because you're being forced, but because you want to. Because you choose to be aware, to be emotionally present, and to risk vulnerability in the name of something real. In the early stages of love, communication is loud. Words are many, expressions are bold, affection is unguarded. But as time passes, especially when trust has been strained or emotional efforts go unnoticed, communication doesn't disappear, it transforms. It softens, it becomes quieter, layered, more nuanced. It moves from what is spoken to what is suggested. And for many women, when she is uncertain of how safe she is to express herself fully, she will begin to speak through subtle signals rather than grand gestures. The modern love dynamic often confuses visibility with truth. If she's not openly declaring her feelings, many men assume she has none. If she's not messaging first, posting about you, or calling late at night, the assumption is that she's moved on. But that's the language of performance, not the language of depth. A woman who's been emotionally invested, and especially one who's been hurt, will rarely re-enter in bold declarations. Instead, she'll send out emotional probes, almost imperceptible ones, and watch closely for your response. She might start watching your stories again. She might like a photo, perhaps an older one. You'll hear that she asked about you through a friend. She might post a quote that's layered in meaning, about letting go, about missing someone, about emotional strength. These aren't accidents, they're offerings. She's not asking you to decode her. She's asking if you're even looking closely enough to see she's still present in her own guarded way. Women are often criticized for being indirect in communication, but this overlooks something vital: emotional safety. When a woman feels emotionally unsafe, not necessarily physically threatened, but unseen, unheard, or dismissed, she will not fight to be understood in direct ways. She'll withdraw into more subtle, emotionally safe patterns of expressing herself. This isn't deception, it's self-protection. She's been vulnerable before. She's likely been told she was too much, too needy, too dramatic. So now she chooses to express in a way that protects her, while still giving you a chance to notice her. There's also a deep emotional wisdom in subtlety. When a woman reaches out loudly, she exposes herself. She takes the risk of rejection in full light. But when she communicates softly, in glances, in gestures, in proximity, she's leaving space for you to rise into awareness. It's an emotional question, a gentle echo that says, "Do you feel me, even when I'm not standing in front of you, declaring my truth?" Subtle communication is relational intuition. A woman may change her behavior slightly, becoming quieter in the group chat, responding slower to your messages, or returning to places that held emotional memory. She might start showing up online at times she knows you're usually active. She may not send a message, but she's still sending energy. And if you're attuned, you'll pick it up. If you're emotionally available, you'll realize that she's still holding the thread, just not in the way you expect. The problem is, many men are not taught to read this language. they look for linear signs. If she wants me, she'll say it. If she misses me, she'll call. But emotional connection is not always linear. Sometimes it's circular, layered, intuitive. It requires presence, not just attention, to notice what she's not saying, to sense what's missing, to feel when something has shifted in her rhythm, and when she's still reaching, just more carefully than before. These subtleties can also be acts of hope, a way to reconnect without the fear of humiliation. She's testing the waters gently. She's wondering, is there still a space for me here? Has he forgotten? Or is he just waiting for me to spell it all out? Because here's the truth. She shouldn't have to yell for you to hear her. She shouldn't have to be loud to be seen. And when she's still making effort, even in the most indirect ways, it's because some part of her still believes in what existed. Social media, mutual friends, memories all become conduits for subtle connection. And if you dismiss these as mere coincidence, you'll miss the most emotionally intelligent forms of communication. A woman's emotional world is rich with meaning. When she shares a playlist that feels oddly familiar, when she mentions a place you once went, when she drops a message at midnight that says just thinking, these are not meaningless gestures. These are bridges. They are attempts to see if you still remember how to meet her halfway. So many relationships remain unfinished not because there was no love, but because no one learned how to hear the unspoken, because someone expected the other to speak louder instead of listening deeper. And in that quiet space, women often stay longer than anyone knows, watching, feeling, waiting to see if subtle presence will be enough to stir connection again. She's not being cryptic, she's being careful. She's not avoiding the truth. She's waiting to see if you can handle it without her having to carry it all. There is a profound difference between taking emotional responsibility and chasing someone. The former is rooted in self-awareness, maturity, and courage. The latter often stems from insecurity and fear of abandonment. And yet, many men confuse the two. They believe that reaching out, apologizing, or expressing vulnerability will automatically make them look weak, needy, or desperate. But that belief isn't strength, it's avoidance wearing a mask of stoicism. In a world where masculinity is still often defined by detachment and emotional control, men are taught to be reactive only to certainty. Don't text unless she texts first. Don't show emotion unless she's already expressed hers. Don't apologize unless she's visibly hurt. But emotional responsibility doesn't wait for clarity, it creates it. It asks, what part of this is mine to own, and not what will she think of me if I say this. It doesn't require perfect words or a perfect outcome. It only requires that you step toward the discomfort instead of hiding behind silence. When a woman pulls away emotionally, or when a relationship becomes strained, there is often a window of opportunity that opens a chance to reconnect, to repair, to rebuild trust. But this window is subtle and fragile. It won't wait forever, and it almost never arrives wrapped in an obvious invitation. It's revealed in the quiet moments, when you feel her absence more than her presence. When you sense she's still there, somehow, but no longer holding the rope for both of you. This is the moment when emotional responsibility becomes vital, not because you have to win her back, but because you recognize your role in the dynamic. Maybe you were emotionally unavailable. Maybe you didn't listen when she needed you to hear her pain, not fix it. Maybe you withheld affection because you were afraid to seem vulnerable. Maybe you assumed she'd always be there, even without your participation. And now she's quiet. She's not angry, she's tired. She's no longer fighting, not because the love is gone, but because the weight of carrying it alone has become too much. Owning your role is not weakness, it's strength. It takes far more courage to say, I missed something, I could have shown up better, than it does to pretend nothing happened. Reaching out, not to control, not to manipulate, not to prove a point, but simply to take accountability, is one of the most masculine things you can do, because it means you are no longer operating from fear, but from truth. Emotional pursuit, on the other hand, is driven by a need for validation. It's the energy of proving your worth, of chasing affection, of performing love. It's not grounded. It panics. It floods her with attention not because it wants to connect, but because it wants relief. Relief from guilt, from shame, from the discomfort of being alone. But emotional responsibility doesn't flood, it invites. It doesn't overwhelm, it holds space. It says, I'm here, I see what I didn't see before, and I'm willing to meet you where you are, not where I need you to be. For many women, the difference is everything. They've experienced pursuit, the rush of passion when they start to leave, the sudden attention when they go quiet. But what they long for is not pursuit, it's partnership. Someone who sees them clearly, even when things are messy. Someone who takes initiative not out of panic, but because they finally understand their emotional impact. They don't need you to rescue the relationship. They need to know you understand your role in why it started to unravel. That begins with the courage to reach out, to say, I've been thinking about what happened. I see now where I could have done better. I'm not reaching out to fix everything. I just didn't want you to think I didn't care. That kind of message is not pursuit, it's presence. It's not about getting her back. It's about giving back something you may have taken for granted. Your accountability, your awareness, your emotional maturity. Many men wait for certainty, a signal from her, a green light, an obvious opening. But real emotional growth doesn't come from waiting for guarantees. It comes from stepping into the unknown, from being willing to feel awkward, unsure, even rejected, because the relationship matters more than your ego. And if she's still quietly holding space for you in her heart, those words, that presence, that reach, it might be the very thing she needed. Not to restart the relationship, but to finally feel that you've grown into someone who no longer waits to be told how to love. Someone who understands that emotional responsibility means showing up, even if the outcome isn't certain. It means saying, I'm here, not because you want something, but because you're finally ready to give something that was missing. There is a hidden pain many women carry in relationships, the ache of waiting. Waiting for the text that never comes, the apology that remains unsaid, the gesture that tells her she still matters. This waiting isn't just about time. It's about emotional labor. It's about the energy of always being the one who keeps the connection alive. And the more she waits, the more invisible she begins to feel, not because she wants to be pursued endlessly, but because she desires to be met, emotionally, vulnerably, and willingly. From the earliest stages of emotional development, many women are conditioned to hold the space of intimacy. They are taught to nurture, to soothe, to make room for others' feelings even at the cost of their own. Over time, this becomes a pattern. She becomes the one who asks how you're really doing. She becomes the one who circles back after conflict. She becomes the one who carries the thread of connection, even when you're pulling away. And when this happens long enough, something inside her begins to bend under the weight. She starts to ask herself questions she never should have to. Why do I always initiate? Why do I feel so alone even when I'm in love? Why do I have to wait for him to realize I matter? This waiting is not romantic. It's not soft or graceful. It's heavy. It breeds self-doubt, emotional fatigue, and eventually resentment. Because to wait for someone who won't move is to slowly convince yourself that you're not worth the effort it takes for them to come forward. And on the other side of this dynamic, there is the man not careless, not unfeeling, but often frozen. He senses the distance, he feels the shift, but he doesn't know how to respond. Beneath that stillness, there is a fear, the masculine fear of rejection. A fear so strong, it often paralyzes even the most emotionally intelligent men. What if I reach out and she doesn't respond? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I make it worse? This fear builds a wall that looks like pride, but is actually self-protection. Many men have been taught that emotional expression is a liability. Vulnerability is weakness. To reach out, especially after disconnection, means risking ego injury. It means confronting shame, taking responsibility, and facing the possibility that it's too late. So instead of stepping forward, they withdraw. Not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to carry that much emotional exposure. Silence becomes the refuge, but silence, while safe, is also a slow erasure of connection. This is the tragedy of timing in so many relationships. She is waiting for him to come closer, not with grand gestures, but with sincerity, with a message that says, "You're not forgotten, I'm still here." And he is waiting for her to signal that it's safe to reach out, that he won't be punished for his absence. Both are waiting for the other to take the first step. Both are hurting in silence, but their reasons are different. She's tired from giving. He's scared of not being received. What neither realizes is that healing doesn't require perfect words or flawless timing. It only requires movement, a single message, a small effort, a voice that says, "I may have failed to show up before, but I don't want to stay silent anymore." The feminine wound of waiting is not just about longing. It's about the exhaustion of loving someone who only comes close when she is already pulling away. And the masculine fear of rejection isn't about indifference. It's about the terror of being open and then left standing alone. But real love, real connection, real repair, they happen in the space where both wounds are acknowledged. Where the woman's exhaustion is met with empathy, and the man's fear is held with gentleness, when he realizes that reaching out isn't about perfect timing, but about courage. And when she feels that she no longer has to be the only one who keeps trying, something softens in her. The emotional seesaw begins to balance. The silence loses its power. The distance becomes a path instead of a wall. The man doesn't need to be fearless. He just needs to be willing to feel the discomfort of stepping into vulnerability, willing to send the message, make the call, knock on the emotional door that's been left ajar, not to demand entry, but to ask gently if he's still welcome. And the woman, in turn, needs to feel that she is not loving alone, that she doesn't have to keep proving her worth through her patience, her giving, her waiting. That love can come toward her too, without her having to always make the first move. In many relationships, especially those that have entered a period of silence or separation, the idea of reconnection often feels daunting. Men frequently wait for an unmistakable sign, a message, a confrontation, a door wide open, before they take action. But the truth is, emotional invitations are rarely loud. They're quiet, delicate, and open-ended, They are not declarations, they are subtle gestures. And for many women, this is the only way they know how to offer space for reconnection. After being emotionally stretched thin, she's not going to send you a roadmap. She's not going to break her silence with a grand proclamation that says, "Now is your time to return." Because to do so would mean she's once again taking on the responsibility of repair. And after carrying the weight of emotional labor for too long, that's not something she's willing to do anymore. What she offers instead is an invitation, one that asks, will you notice? Will you respond without needing to be begged? Will you choose to lean in, even when you're unsure? This invitation lives in the spaces where she remains visible, yet distant. Maybe she starts showing signs of life on your radar again. Her name pops up, her presence lingers online. She interacts with memories in small ways. She may not speak directly to you, but she makes herself reachable. That's the invitation. It's not loud, not urgent. It's quiet because it's tender, because she doesn't know if she can fully open again. And she's waiting to see if you can approach gently enough not to break the fragile ground beneath her. The open invitation is about presence, not proving. She doesn't need you to show up with dramatic apologies or carefully constructed arguments. She doesn't want to be convinced, she wants to be considered. She wants to feel that you've thought about her in her absence, that her silence meant something, that her withdrawal wasn't taken as indifference, but as a cry for balance, for partnership, for recognition. Men often get stuck in the idea that the first message has to be perfect, that if they don't say the right thing, it'll ruin the chance. But she's not waiting for poetry. She's waiting for effort, for you to say something simple and human. I've been thinking about you, or I feel the space between us, and I'm not okay with it staying this way. These aren't scripts, they're offerings. They don't fix everything, but they say what matters most. I see you, and I care enough to come closer. What many don't understand is that she's already taken a risk by leaving the door cracked open. It's a vulnerable move to leave space for someone who may not walk through it. It's her way of saying, I haven't locked you out, but I also can't be the one to reach again. She's hoping that you understand the difference between an open heart and an open wound, that you can recognize the courage it takes to leave space for someone who hasn't always shown up. She's not asking you to do everything, she's asking you to do something. That something might be initiating a small conversation. It might be acknowledging that the distance has grown and you've been part of why. It might be reflecting on where things fell apart and offering an olive branch, not to return to what was, but to honor what could be. The invitation she leaves open is not about returning to the past. It's about checking if you're ready to meet her in a more emotionally equal present. The risk she's taking is quiet, but real. She may act composed, even indifferent, but beneath that stillness is hope. And that hope isn't for a rescue or for grand romance. It's for recognition. She wants to be remembered. She wants to matter enough that you don't wait for fireworks before you knock gently on the door she left open. And she wants to know if you're capable of noticing something that isn't being shouted. Emotional maturity lives in the subtle. It's not about reading minds, but about tuning in, about being willing to move even when the path isn't lit with clarity. When she leaves the invitation open, she's not offering you control, she's offering you a choice. To respond, to acknowledge, to reconnect with presence rather than pressure. And whether or not you respond isn't just about the relationship. It's about who you choose to be when love requires your courage, not your certainty. At the heart of this entire message is a quiet but powerful truth. Emotional connection doesn't survive through silence, pride, or fear. It lives through awareness, responsibility, and presence. So many relationships falter not because love is absent, but because expression is withheld. She is not asking you to perform. She's not waiting for dramatic gestures. She's longing for emotional reciprocity, for you to notice, to care, to respond, and to hold space as fully as she has done, often in silence for far too long. Her withdrawal is not the end. It's a recalibration. It's a pause born from exhaustion, not disinterest. She is still there in the subtle shifts, in the quiet invitations, in the emotional traces she's left behind. But now she waits not for your pursuit but for your presence. She waits to see if you will step into the discomfort of vulnerability and meet her where emotional maturity lives, not in dominance or distance, but in the courage to say, I'm still here and I finally see what I couldn't before. If you're wondering whether you should reach out, whether she still cares, whether it's too late, know this. What she's waiting for isn't perfection. It's effort. It's not about fixing everything. It's about owning your part, showing your growth, and proving through action, not performance, that you are no longer hiding behind fear. You don't need to chase her, but you do need to choose her intentionally, with humility and emotional honesty, because the space she left open for you won't remain open forever. And the cost of silence is not rejection, it's regret.